Greetings everybody, this is Tony Drake back at you guys to share more information. But now we're going to take like an expose on this health journey. One of the most influential parts of my life was my grandmother allowing me to be that person that I came to this world to be. I give her that because unlike anyone else in my life, she identified certain things about me and she allowed me to do it and she supported it. Not very, very actively, but she never stopped it. So when I wanted to, learn more about things, I saw my grandmother as this reflection of that. One day I came home from school, I was about maybe 9 or 10, and I saw my grandmother sit in the yard. My grandmother's from Arkansas. She was sitting in the front yard, and the redbirds and the bluebirds, was like on her shoulder. I'd never seen that before. And then my grandmother said, she has a really good kinship with nature. And she would grow our garden, okra and all of those things. So she helped me understand the importance of having a relationship with nature. So as I became older, I started to have the same kind of relationship with nature that my grandmother offered me by enhancing my understanding of how to do that, by just observing nature. Pretty much what George Washington Carver said as well. And my grandmother's old school like George Washington Carver. But here was the deal. As a child, I knew my grandmother taught us, how to go out in the field and identify natural plants. Like in Arkansas, persimmons grow wild, pecans grow wild, black walnut grows wild, and certain other berries grow wild. So we would go out certain times of the year, we knew when they came, we would go out and pick them and eat them and so forth. And that was the beginning. So by the time I was 18, listen, I became a vegetarian because in Chicago, where I came from, there were brothers who were into different levels of knowledge. Let me give you an example. I'm 18. I'm with a brother who's a good friend of mine who I met when I was about maybe like 17. And this brother taught me, he said, hey man, you shouldn't be eating pork. I'm like, why not? So he explained some basic things to me and said, that's why we shouldn't be eating pork. When he told me that, immediately I stopped eating pork. And my family was like, you don't eat pork? You don't want no bacon? You don't want pork chops? Nope, I don't eat it anymore. Never ate chitlins, Wouldn't touch that. That was disgusting to me even when I was a child. I couldn't comprehend how anybody could eat that stuff. However, so I meet this brother. He was a Hebrew brother from Chicago. The brothers used to wear the robes and the head wraps, and some of the brothers would have a staff. This brother used to ride a moped, a little moped, and he would, we would see him and he'd speak to us and give us a little knowledge. But I was taught not to eat pork. But then later on, I met other brothers who not only did not eat pork, they didn't eat meat at all. They didn't eat any meat. Now that was something I did not quite comprehend. So when they started to tell me about meat, etc., and what it did to the body, and what it did to your consciousness, what I then did was, I stopped eating meat. And if you think my family was like, he doesn't eat pork anymore, when I stopped eating meat altogether, everybody was talking, oh, Tony don't eat meat, or he don't eat meat. And my grandmother would say to me, well, why you not eat meat? I'm like, oh, mother dear, look, I don't like to eat meat because, I'm learning how to, take better care of myself. And it's just something I want to do. I want to be a vegetarian. And, she didn't have much to say about it. But on that journey, I met brothers who were already into Kemet and the knowledge of Egypt. Long before, this was in the early 80s, 81, 82, 83, I met these brothers. One such brother, his name was Ramses. Ramses lived on the west side of Chicago. So I would go to talk to Ramses and he would teach me a lot of knowledge, even though I didn't comprehend it. I was like 17. I didn't comprehend it. But he was teaching me how to make falafel from scratch. Even back then, how to make proper beverages, like hibiscus and orange leaf tea and so forth. He was making that back then. And he was teaching me these things. And then I went on to meet more and more brothers who was teaching me, a lot of things. And the most important thing here is, keep this in mind. Am I a religious person? I'm not. But I respect religion. Particularly, I respect religion for people who are actually living it. Because to me, as long as you're not imposing your will on anyone, and you're cultivating yourself to be your best self, that's all that matters. So I respect any religion that has that as its core principle. Now, on this journey, meeting all of these people, Dr. Alvenia Fulton, and for people in Chicago and Detroit, everybody knows about Dr. Alvenia Fulton. So Dr. Alvenia Fulton was somebody I met, and she was like a herbalist and a nutritionist. So I learned a lot from Alvenia Fulton. But I met many, many other people. I met Dick Gregory. I met Dr. Sebi, but I met a lot of other people. Some people, their names are not coming to me right now. But listen, before I met Dr. Sebi, because of the people that I met, what I started to do was study on my own. So I picked up a lot of books and information and took little courses on how to identify natural plants in the field. So the Midwest has a certain type of plant species that are not necessarily indigenous to other parts of the country, particularly in this part of the country, in the Southwest. So there's like all of these different plants that I had to learn in the Midwest, and then other plant species that I had to learn once I came to the Southeast, which is, the variety is different. It's not as many in the southern parts of the country than it is in the Midwest and the northern parts. Now, listen, I was identifying so many plants. I knew almost every plant that I needed to do or use with whatever problem that I may have had. And then, I didn't really have many problems, but I saw other people who had it, and I would share it with them. Now, one day I was sitting down, listening to WVON, talk radio station in Chicago. Just listen. I was like an avid listening to WVON. Then one day this guy comes on and they said, introducing, Dr. Sebi, who's a natural herbalist and everything. He's giving his bio. Then I'm listening to this guy. I'm listening to the radio. I'm just sitting up, reading or something. I'm listening to the radio. And then this guy comes on the radio and he says that most of the food that we eat is not natural, it's man-made. Then he got my attention. He said, cauliflower. Can you go out in nature and show me wild cauliflower? I never liked cauliflower. I still don't. And I'm like, wow. He said, can you go out and show me wild broccoli? Can you go out and show me a wild carrot? He said, none of it is natural. It's all products of industrial agriculture, crossbreeding, etc., etc. And then he started talking about the African biomineral diet. And he asked, when they brought us from Africa and brought us here, did they bring our food with us? When he started talking about all those things, because I was very Afrocentric as well, all of that resonated with me. And then at the end of his presence on the show, it was introduced that he was going to be at Kennedy King College in Chicago. Kennedy King College, he would be there to do a lecture. Man, look, I went and got my ticket like the same day. I'm like, there's nothing that's going to stop me from hearing this guy, right? So I went to go hear Dr. Sebi, and he blew my mind. I'm just going to be honest. For all of the information that he shared with us about food, health, and nutrition, and the African biomineral balance or diet, and being in this kind of environment and not being in the sun and what it's done to us, oh, look, after that, that just totally changed my perspective on everything, So after, being in the lecture, when it was Q&A time, I raised my hand, with a lot of other people. A lot of people was asking Sebi all kind of questions. So my question was, Dr. Sebi, since you talk about certain foods that are not natural, this fruit that I found, it's called guanabana. Is that a natural fruit? He said, what did you say, young man? I'm like, is guanabana, is it natural? He said, yes it is. When he told me that, that started a whole nother quest for learning the tropical foods from the tropical parts of the world. Remember, I already knew the Midwest. I knew that region. But then it put me on a quest to learn the natural tropical foods, because he said it had more electricity, it had more minerals, it had more nutrients. And having seen, what the temperate zones, and I think the Midwest is like zone 5 and zone 6. No, zone 5 and zone 4. Having seen what they can do for you, and he's saying that the tropical fruits and plants have more energy, have more electricity, have more vitality in them. I'm like, wow, okay. So here's what happened. So I started studying the tropical plants. But I'm like, okay, I've done as much as I can do here in America just by studying it. Let me go to Africa. So in 1999, I booked my first trip to West Africa. I went to Africa. The first thing I did when I got to Africa was because a friend of mine lived in Africa and had been inviting me for years to come. So I called him one day in Africa, and I'm like, look, he was in Ghana. So I called him, I'm like, I'm ready to come to Africa. He said, brother, you sure? I'm like, I'm positive. I got my passport, I got my visa, I'm ready. He says, okay, cool. Book your flight, I'll pick you up at the airport. I'm like, excellent. So I booked my flight, went to Africa, and he met me at the airport, and he was living like up in the mountainous regions of Ghana. He lived in Peking, which is northern Ghana, way up in the mountains, tropical rainforest and everything, right? And so I went on up there, with him. And the first thing I saw, believe it or not, was guanabana growing in the trees. And of course, I'm like in heaven. Wild mangoes growing everywhere, guanabana, and a lot of other fruit that I was curious about, but most people didn't even know what they were. I had to ask some of the elders what were these fruits, because the common person didn't even know what they were. And West Africa has a lot of fruits and a lot of different plants that people don't care about. So I go up in the mountains with Kwaku, and so we're all around. He's taking me all around, introducing me to the elders and everything. And this was in 1999. I started to identify plants, and the elders would tell me what they're used for, what the leaves are for, what the fruit is for, what the seed is for. Now I'm getting this real world-class education on African foods, and being of African origin, I wanted to know these foods. So I'm learning all of these natural plants, man, and it was just a beautiful experience. Then they took me to this other area of the village to meet the elders. And these elders were like 94, 102, and I got to meet them, and we had this conversation. And then they started teaching me a lot about African culture and history and some of Africa's ancient past. And it was great. So that put me on another path. Now, when I came back to the U.S., and this is interesting, when I came back to the U.S. after that trip, look, after 2 weeks, I was homesick. I wanted to go back to Africa. I'm like, look, I'm going back to Africa. 4 months later, I was right back in Africa. And then I stayed there for like a month. But check this out. That time I got malaria. And, I'm new, I don't know a lot. But I got the right herbs, and the malaria was going like in 24 hours, it was gone. Now I want to know more. So I get back and I study malaria, I study protozoa, I study parasites, I'm doing all of this. And what's the best things to use besides the African herb? I was given neem, a plant called neem in Africa. So this plant grows everywhere. It's like a weed, it grows everywhere. Took a little of the leaf, took some of the fruit, took some of the bark, ground it up in a pestle and mortar, real fine, and I took it. I'm telling you, the malaria was like over in like 24 hours. It was gone. So what I'm saying to you is this. This journey of mine has been incredible. But look at this. My journey took me from Ghana to Burkina Faso, to Togo, to Cote d'Ivoire, to Nigeria, and to one other country, in Mali. So it took me to all of those countries, and I spent time in all of those countries. In the Dogon and Mali, let me tell you, you haven't had an experience until you start talking with the Dogon. So I got to go through all of these experiences. But then I came back from Africa, and then I did a similar trip in Latin America, Panama and Costa Rica, learning more. Then I left there, came back, and I went to the Caribbean and learned more. Then I went to Europe and learned a little more. And all of these experiences, man, prepared me to do something significant that I never wanted to do. When I looked at Sabi and all the things that Sabi did, look, I'm like, okay, I appreciate everything Sabi does, and he's taught me a lot to be able to live a better life, in terms of health. But I never wanted to be someone who would be a part of nutrition and so forth. I was into building things, electronics and all of that. That was, pretty much that was my interest. I was into building other things, but health, nutrition, and doing that was not my interest. I did not want to do it, and I avoided it at all costs. I was not interested. But then one day, being here in Georgia, it was brought to me, hey man, look at this pandemic. And look, I seen it when it first hit. It was like March, and everything shut down here in Atlanta. It was like a ghost town. It was like a movie. All of us have seen these movies for years. Little did we know it would actually happen. Literally. And then we heard, for a lot of us who were, persons who studied, we would see these oppressive societies that became that way because of circumstances in the society, where you needed a car to be able to travel around, kind of like slavery, where you needed a little pass or a note from your owner to be able to move around freely. Now they're talking about having these cards, where it's a coronavirus stamp where you are, you're not infected and so forth. And I just found out today, like when you go to the airport before you can even travel, they want to test you and see what your temperature is and all of this. I don't know if it's in all of the airports, but that's what I saw. So we saw movies like this for years. And then I find out, with this whole election piece, and, some people will disagree or agree. Nonetheless, it does exist right now about the fraud in the campaign. And people's lives being threatened if they step up and tell the truth about, what they saw in the voting polls and so forth. All of this will affect your health. Because if we go into another lockdown, it is said that if you are in this lockdown, this is what scientists have just put out. Being in this lockdown, the air that you're breathing in the environment that you're in, like in your house, could be just as deadly as being around a lot of other people, depending on who's in the household with you. I'm telling you, it's madness. But what I'm saying to you is this. It's very simple. Your body is magnificent. Let no one tell you any difference. But in this environment, you're going to need the tools or the resources to keep yourself healthy, no matter what. Understand something. Being clean and sanitary is important. It's good. But you must also supply your body with what it needs, because we're missing it. You understand? We're missing the very things that keep us healthy, and that's nutrition. Yes, the body creates hydrochloric acid. The body, through the lymph system, through the lymph node, it pumps out certain cells to keep your body healthy, and for these cells to go out and scour through your body to remove things that's not supposed to be there. But if you're not getting fresh oxygen, lots of sunshine, the body becomes less effective in doing that. Now, the lymph system only works when you're really moving. It really works when you're moving. And humans are meant to move, not to be, cooped up in some little environment. No. The human body is designed to be able to move, take in fresh air, release carbon dioxide, or I should say, release any CO2 or what have you from your body. Because your body is sweating, it's oscillating. And what we're looking at is, if you don't have that, then your body gets weaker. So the best thing you can do is take what is necessary to keep your immune system strong. Because I am telling you, in this environment that we're in, we don't know what's coming next. The best thing to do is to keep your body strong. I do it. There's no games, there's no room here to compromise on your health. No room. Now, some people say that this thing is fake and blah, 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 blah. Look, it's not fake. Now, what do I mean by that? We don't know what's going on. So we can speculate because it hasn't affected us or somebody we know. But I can say with certainty, something is going on. I don't know what it is. But I'm saying if my immune system is strong, then I know that my immune system is extremely powerful and what it's designed to do, to be able to do it effectively, because I'm giving it what it needs to be optimal. Let me give you an example. You have a child. And let's say this child is really, really good with math, but they're not really good in French. But it's one of the selected items that they need to have so that they can pass or graduate or whatever. So, most parents are like this. instead of giving the child more resources and or support to increase their math abilities, they will give them a tutor to help them with French and forget the math, as if learning French is something important. Rather than say, okay, remove the French, we don't care about that, that's not important to us. We want him to increase his math abilities because this is a natural talent for him. They will neglect the natural talent and get a tutor for French. Passing or not passing French is not very important. But learning math and how this child can apply math in so many areas of life, even physics, chemistry, you name it, mechanics, math applies to it all. They don't focus on that. They focus on something that is totally insignificant. In other words, they clip the child's wings. What I'm saying here is, we're in an environment now that we've never experienced. You see, when the Spanish flu hit in the early part of this century, it didn't lock down the world. Everybody wasn't affected by it. It didn't destroy economies and businesses and people's lives, etc. It didn't. Not to this scale. What we're experiencing now, we don't know what is going to happen. China's blaming America for it. America's blaming China for it. China's blaming India for it. India's, it's crazy. What I'm saying, can we afford to subjugate ourselves or subject ourselves to this geopolitical thing going on? Because it is said that, look, economic war is followed by physical war. And we're like at the doorstep of it. You got to keep your body healthy so that you can move and navigate and maneuver when you need to. Because if your body works properly, you can survive anything that comes. But your body has to be working at an optimum level. If you need to be able to run from here a block and keep moving fast because disaster is around you, you have to be able to get up and move fast like that. Because if you can't, look, when Japan had that tsunami, I looked at this Japanese guy. It was this woman. She was moving really slow. She could hardly move. So he went back to help her while the water and all the debris was coming. But he ran back to help her. She couldn't really move. He went back and grabbed her, and when he grabbed her and tried to hurry with it, it got both of them, and they were both gone. That debris, and it just crushed them, and they were gone. That was it. I don't know if he knew this woman or not, but she couldn't really run. She was older, but she couldn't really move. I'm 57. I could outrun someone who's like 25. I'll put him out there and I'll race him. I will. But I'm telling you, I could get from here to a block or two away and keep running, even if I'm out of breath, and keep on moving. I'm saying if your body don't work, you're in trouble. That's why we created the VK Platinum product line. Why? Change what you do, take in the best nutrients, etc., so that your body, you can stay here and your body is in good shape. You're going to need this body for what we're about to go through. It needs to be in good shape. Now remember my words. I'm saying this to you now. You have the opportunity to take care of this body. We simply created the products because what? It is just a matter of time before this thing hit us in ways that we cannot imagine. And I'm telling you what I know. Looking at the parameters of what's going on in this world, we don't know what's coming. So the best thing to do is prepare yourself. That's all you can do. So again, this is Tony Drake, sharing more information with you. And visit us again at platinumvk.com.